All right, here we are at Great Furniture Deal to bring to you probably one of our most important segments we've had yet, and that's talking about fixing a La-Z-Boy recliner. In this particular case, we're going to talk about a La-Z-Boy lift recliner. Has lots of different functions, lots of different features going on, but one of the number one questions we get is, hey, my recliner is broken, I need help, can you fix it? Now, straight out of the gun, La-Z-Boy is going to be a little bit more complicated, their parts are more expensive, it's just a little bit more technical, but we're going to walk you through it and try and help you figure it out. So you'll come in here real quick with us. We're going to talk about this particular lift chair. It's got a lot going on. A very popular remote. Looks similar, but there's going to be a couple of differences that we're going to notice. As you can see in this one, we have lumbar, headrest, leg rest, back, and then the two lift functions. So first thing that we usually say when something goes wrong in your chair is there's three main parts that you got to look for. Number one is going to be the remote. Number two is going to be the power supply that we have back here that powers the chair. And the third one is going to be the motors. So we're going to go over all this chair and help you figure out how to diagnose it. So the first place that we're going to start is the motors, the remote. A lot of times, if your chair stops working, the remote's the culprit, and especially on a remote like this that's in here, it gets played with a lot. We have a lot of customers that will say, hey, I know I have a nervous twitch. I just sit in the chair while I'm watching TV and I do this. Obviously not good for a remote. If buttons break, buttons become faded. Some of the buttons aren't working, but some are, is usually a good inclination that the remote is the problem and it's broken. It's kind of hard to see in the light on this one, but this remote is actually backlit. So if it's getting power, and there's still that backlight that's on it and some of the functions still work, it's most likely your remote. So if you're having issues, let us know what it is. The back of the remote has a tag on it that will help us. You can take a picture of that and text it to us, and we can tell you what that is, or you can take a picture of the front, we can tell you which one it is, but usually the remote. And to be fair, this remote's not cheap. It's a kind of an expensive remote, but this is usually the culprit. Another thing to check is the power supply. So come back in here, we're going to have you zoom in here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this power supply. So La-Z-Boy has a couple of different power supplies. They have a 5-pin power supply, and then they have a 10-pin power supply. So this is the 10-pin power supply. It's got a little green light on it. It does have a battery backup. In all honesty, this battery backup is worthless. It doesn't really do anything. It's two 9-volt batteries, and in the event that your chair goes down, there's usually not enough power in those 9 volts to really get it to where it needs to go. So to be honest, don't rely on this as your emergency backup because it's really not going to get you to where you need to go in the event of an emergency. So again, this is a 10-pin, goes like this, looks like this, and different than a 5-pin. It's very unique to La-Z-Boy. There isn't another generic out there that you can replace it with, but this is the power supply. One of the things we want to talk about in this power supply is right now it has the green light. One thing that you can know for sure that either maybe your remote's broken or your motor's broken is as soon as you plug this into the chair, so this one just has the female connection, this is what it looks like. We're going to plug the male connection into it. Once we plug it in, if for some reason this green light goes out, it means there's a short in your chair. So when it was unplugged, it was green. If I plug it in and this thing has a short, you'll know, and it goes off, it means that either we have a remote problem or we have a motor problem. Here's how you fix that, or how you kind of know what your next step is. So let's say I plug it in, light goes off. The next thing you'd want to do is we're going to unplug the remote first. If I unplug this remote, which is just a connection that will fish out the bottom, and we'll show you this here in a minute, but we'll fish that out, is if you unplug the remote and the light turns back on, you know that this is causing the short. If you leave the remote in and you unplug the motor, which we'll show you that here in a minute too, then you know that the motor's causing the short. So that's the easiest way to know, hey, my power supply is good, but my motor's broken, or my remote's broken. So that's the real issue. All right, we're gonna go ahead now, we're gonna tip the chair up. Now I understand that La-Z-Boy chairs specifically are very heavy. There's a lot going on in here, and they're kind of built like tanks, as we say. So when you flip this, you might need somebody else to help you. But here's what I found the simplest way to do is if you just get behind it and kind of just push forward, use your legs, not your back, save your back, and you can kind of push forward. So once we push forward, we're now looking at the underbelly, as I call it, of the chair. So we go back here, this is the power supply. So I'm just going to unplug it so we can see where it comes from. But here's the power supply. Everything should be zip tied up into your chair. If it goes right, this is going to come down and it goes into the junction box. but that's the power supply and where it comes from. But we're going to talk about the remote, because the remote is really what we want to talk about. So the remote is down here, right here. So the remote comes down through the side. It's actually labeled only connect to a 1 pH, but they have these little lock clips on them. You just pull the lock clip back and slide it out. So this is a remote, you can tell because it has the squiggly, right? That's what makes it extend. One of the most important things you do when you put the remote in here is you want to make sure that it comes down in a part that doesn't get caught in anything that could potentially kink it, whatever it does, because if anything splices the cable or whatever, that's what ruins the remote. And unfortunately, we can't just replace part of the wire. You have to replace the whole remote. So like I said, if you feel like if your power supply light is off and you unplug this remote and it comes back on, you know this is the remote. But in order to replace the remote, you can either try and squeeze your hand down. If you have a bigger hand, I don't have big hands, but if you have a smaller hand, sometimes you can fit it down through here to unplug it and plug in your new remote. It's really simple install. So if you buy a new remote, all you got to do is come under here, find out where the remote came from, and then simply plug in the new one. So this one here is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pin. So the 8-pin connection goes in here, just matches arrow to arrow, makes it real simple. Snap it back into place, and then I put the remote cable up through the seat so that I have the most reach to it. One thing that's really important, actually, we can probably talk about here for a moment, is a lot of folks will call us in and say, hey, I've had shoulder surgery on one arm, left arm, right arm, and it's hard for me to reach through the remote. You can always come down in here and unplug this and then fish it back in the other side. So if you had shoulder surgery on your right side, then you're going to use your left. Fish the remote to the left. By default, we put it on the right. Unfortunately for the left-handed folks in the world, most people are right-handed, so we naturally put it on the right. But you can easily move this through and put it on the left-hand side. So just keep that in mind as you're doing that. Let's go in here and then talk about the motors. So this is a lift chair with a power headrest. So this chair actually is going to have multiple motors. And what you'll see right here is we're going to have 2 motors, right? We have the big, kind of the heavy duty, what I call it, motor, doing most of the work here. This is going to be our lift motor. And then down here, we have our other motor. This is going to handle the recline function of everything. So we have the smaller motor here, and then we have the heavy duty lift motor here. Now, one thing to kind of note on the motor, and we'll talk about just how to replace it. So if you do need a new motor on your chair, the thing that we're going to need from you is we're going to either need you to come and get this label right here. So if you kind of zoom in here, you can see there's a label that's on this right here, this whole label. We would need this label. If it's this motor we got to replace, unfortunately that label is up in here. So you kind of got to stick your phone, your camera, whatever it is, up in here. And on the other side of this, there is a label. I can feel it, it's in here. But there is a label on the underside of this motor. The other thing you can do is you can pull out the pins right here. So if you pull this pin out, slide this clevis pin out, this is how you take the motor out. You can see that came down because this is the lift portion, like I said. But it's a really simple install. Once I get that done, all I have to do is I just take these and unscrew them. It does take some pliers to kind of get these out. But once you unscrew that, this whole piece kind of slides right out. It makes it real easy. So I'm gonna stick the clevis pin back in here so I don't have to hold the chair up. And you just kind of push it to the spot you get it, you want it to, and pull the pin, stick it back in. But I mean, that's really how simple it is to install a new motor. So if we know what motor you need, it's really easy to install it. We also have a junction box down here with a bunch of cables. So if for some reason a cat or dog or anybody's gotten in there and started chewing on any of these wires, if you can follow the wire and figure out where it is, we can get you a replacement. The last thing I want to mention is this. So sometimes in order to really know what parts you need in your chair, because a lot of folks have a hard time figuring out what it is, and so that we know what parts go in your chair, if you come in here on the back side of the footrest, right here in the back side of the footrest, there are some tags of when your chair was made. It tells us some information about the style number and other things on here. So sometimes we'll ask you for a picture of this tag, and you can come in through this bottom here and take a picture of the tag to be able to get us more information on what the part of yours or what products you need. That way we can make sure we get you the correct product for your part or for your chair. And it just helps us understand what the guts into your chair are so that we know. Anyway, lots of things going on in here, but that's the basics of how to know and how to troubleshoot a La-Z-Boy recliner. Maybe one other quick thing that we'll show you is on this other motor here. We're going to just show you real quick in here. There's this other motor in here actually goes the same way. So just a little clevis pin. It's got some grease on here, but we would just pull out the same clevis pin here, and then pop. This is a cotter pin actually, but pop the clevis pin out here. Just slide it out. I'm not going to pull it out because it doesn't need to be replaced. But that's all it is. On this particular motor down here, it's just 2 quick clevis pins. Pop it out. If for some reason you ever have any issue changing it, one thing you can do is you can take this chair and stick it over on its side. If you stick it on its side, it takes all of the weight off of this coming up and down. Plus, you can also plug it in and test it all while it's on its side, and it'll still recline and it'll lift. It doesn't hurt anything. You don't want to do that on the side because the footrest has to go out. It's going to bind on itself, so you don't want to do that. So make sure you can put it on its side, test it, and that way you can kind of figure out what's going on. Last thing I'd want to bring up is this right here. So you really have to get inside the chair. La-Z-Boy is actually really good about all of their backs come off. So if we wanted to take the full back off of this and move it, real simple here. I'm not gonna go all the way down, but there's 2 just pins in here, 2 levers. You kind of hear it while I play with it here. But if I move that lever down, I slide this lever down. There's one on this other side too. I slide both of them down, and that just pulls it into the, you can kind of see it if you come over here and see that lever here. That one right there, yep. That lever right there. I can either push that down, lock it into place, or pull it so that's how I can just pull the back off. So real easy, removable backs, really easy to do. But the other thing I want to show you is in here, if you want to come in here, there are 2 other motors that you can see right here. This is a lumbar motor. You can see another tag. So this is the lumbar motor. And then up here, another motor. This is the power headrest motor. So you might not know it, but in this chair, you actually have 4 motors. And all of them, like I say, are just plugged in to that junction box that was underneath. Everything plugs in. These motors up here, even though they're a little bit harder to get to, still 2 clevis pins is all that it is. Pop out the 2 clevis pins, pull out the motor, and you can replace it all. But that's all the pieces that are inside this La-Z-Boy lift chair. This is a Liberty collection. One other thing I might mention is sometimes folks say their power headrest is broken. So you can see right here how I just pull the power headrest forward. Well, the reason is because the power headrest motor will go out, but in order to come back, it's just spring fed. So this is just 2 springs that are inside the power headrest. And so for some reason your chair is stuck in this position here. It could be that the motor's out because the motor is just staying out, but in most cases it's probably because your spring's broken. So that's one way to know. You can always just sit and pull on your power headrest to know if that motor's good. So again, simple 1, 2, 3 process. Unfortunately, it's an iterative process sometimes to say, hey, is it my remote? Is it my power supply? Is it one of my motors? And in a La-Z-Boy, there's one step that there's a junction box with some cables. But like I said, most cases, it's going to be the remote. If it's not the remote, it's the power supply. The power supply just gets eaten by the dog, the vacuum cleaner, gets tripped on, gets pulled out. And then worst case scenario, we go into the motor. Biggest thing is if you have any questions or needs with it, we're here to help you troubleshoot. We work on these all the time. We can tell you what the issues are. Give us a call at greatfurnituredeal.com. You can send us pictures of what you got going on. We can help you identify the problems, get you the replacement parts so we can get your chair working again.